So today, I'm going to take your questions. I want to take your questions about spiritual principle, about spiritual practices, about the spiritual journey that you may be on. And while I promise to answer, I may not have the answer you're looking for, but it will reflect my deepest understanding and where I am right now. But what I want to point out is that the questions all have value, and that the spiritual questions that are pulling at your heart and your mind are the ones that the world needs to hear. So if it's rumbling around in your being, it's rumbling on the planet, and it needs to come out into the light of day and be addressed for us to lift ourselves from what is to what could be, right? So I invite you to take a deep breath, to think and to allow that question that you need to ask or need to hear be brought into consciousness right now, into collective consciousness and individual consciousness. And that we allow this moment to be as it's truly meant to be. So we have a question over here.
Thank you, Reverend Ken. I would like you to talk about healing grief. I've lost a precious person. I know other people in this community have recently lost some precious person to them. And while I believe that the essence goes on after death, I can't bring that to heal my grief. And I wish you could speak to that. Thank you.
Sure. So everyone, I just invite you to take a deep breath. One of the amazing things, Francine, that I have come to uncover about grief is that it actually doesn't diminish. And that sounds really harsh. But what I have also learned is that what happens is that life still continues to grow and unfold around it. And so the grief stays in a container inside our hearts because it is valuable to us. It is important to us. But that life also builds up around it so that the grief becomes a smaller and smaller part of our collective whole. And while that doesn't help in the middle, I get that. You're right in the pain of it right now, the preciousness of that. I remember standing here and standing with you when my nephew transitioned at 17 years old, had his own hand. And that just felt insurmountable at the time for many of us in my family. And I remember the people who literally were the scaffolding that held me up. And at his memorial service, which I led, my daughter. Okay, thank you. My daughter, Roma, was in the audience at the memorial service, and she was sitting next to JD, my husband, and said, "Papa's crying." And JD said to her, "Yeah, it's okay. He's sad." And she goes, "But everybody's watching him." And it was wonderful to be able to allow Roma to see grief. And what we've always taught here and what I've always known is we never apologize for tears. They are such an honoring. So thank you for honoring your friends so much and sharing your grief, sharing your own personal loss. They know how precious it is to have the people who are our scaffolding not to be there for us. And grief as I've come to understand it, is the greatest transformative agent we can ever lean into. And many of us want to avoid it at all cost, want to avoid grief. It's too painful. It's too painful. But when we can lean into grief for a loved one, but also grief for our own shortcomings, grief for the things we did wrong, things we could have done better. When we can stand in our own grief, it becomes the thing that makes us take the next right step. It makes us do something differently. It makes us reach out to the friend we haven't talked to in too long, to the friend that we have blocked away because of one thing they said. I mean, that's it. They are dead to me. Well, life is too precious and too short to exclude anyone for a mistake, for a misunderstanding, for not being the wholeness that they could have been. When we can stand in our own grief and try as our best to forgive ourselves and to honor others, we don't let those moments go by. I don't know if you got to say a goodbye to your friend. You did. Oh, what a gift. What a gift. And if you didn't get to say goodbye, if anyone here didn't get to say goodbye to one of those friends, feel your feelings and do that now. Because it's for you and they are everywhere present. They know it. All right, we have another question here and here.
Thanks for being here, Dr. D. Dr. Ken. This is related in a sense to that. I'm curious if unity has, and you specifically, because I don't get the impression there's a lot of doctrine, more nearly presentation, self-deliverance in the face of decline with age or decline with a disability or anything of that sort. Does unity, and do you have a thought on that? I know Buddhism is very against it, and many religions are, but I think it's going to be a big factor with people living a long time, but not necessarily well during that long time. And along with that, I don't hear much said about, and it's not important necessarily, but do you think there's an afterlife, or do you think it's okay to presume otherwise? Those two things, euthanasia, thoughts on that, and an afterlife. Thank you.
So careful for what you ask for. I said to several people before I did this going, I want tough questions. It's like, unapologetic manifestation. 2 weeks ago, I have a friend, I shared this a couple of weeks ago, but I'll share it in greater detail right now. I've known for just about 40 years. We met in our 20s on Fire Island in New York City, right off in New York City. And he is ill. He has MS and has been on a slow decline. And we text frequently, and I see him when I can. He was recently hospitalized, and he texted me and said, I need a visit. So I went over to his house, and he started talking to me about wanting to end his own life, and that he didn't know if it was time or not. And so, first off, I said, I have no judgment at all about this. We talked about it, and we talked about how he would do it. He has a doctor lined up. It is legal here in California, if you don't know, to have doctor assisted on this. And we went through all of his thinking around it. One of the things I said to him is, well, who would you want there? If you were going to do this, who would you want to be by your side? And he goes, well, I have these list of people. And he said, but I'd be scared I'd impose on them. And I looked at him and said, they have agency, and so do you. No matter what's going on in your body, you still have agency, and you get to ask for what you want. And that's one of the things. So when you're talking to your loved ones and to your relatives about this, to please share with them what your desires are, because that's how you get them fulfilled. That's how you fulfill your desire here on earth, and you honor other people. And I said to him as well that I can be there for them. I can be there for him. We also had great conversations. He's atheist, and he doesn't believe necessarily in an afterlife, but we talked about it. One of the things he said is, I am so hopeful that actually when I do make my transition, that my beloved dog Dash is going to see me on the other side. Right? And I so resonated with that. And when I was at Unity Village last week, I took a picture of the Rainbow Bridge. We have an actual rainbow bridge that someone constructed for in our pet cemetery spot. And so I sent a picture of him to him, and he said, that's exactly what I imagined it would look like, right? And then I said to him this. So I said, what do you want people to remember you for? And he thought about it for a second, and he was able to tell me exactly what he wanted to be remembered for. And then I was able to tell him how he was all those things to me and give him specific examples of how he had done those things and how I would never, ever forget them. And then the final thing I said with him was, he says, so what do you think? And I said, I think you're not there yet. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, because if you were ready, this would have been a totally different conversation. What you're asking me about is when you're ready, not if. And so I think it is one of the most courageous and beautiful things that people can do is to decide when to end this physical life. Unity teaches something very specific, and it's not dogmatic, but it's a teaching that we believe, is that life is eternal. And when I was growing up, I thought that meant that life went on after this, that I was conceived and made in this body, and that I would go on to something after this. But what I've come to understand about eternal is that it means that my spirit, my essence, my being pre-existed this body. And that's what will pre-exist after this body. And that this is the vehicle I'm in at the moment. But there's this incredible spectrum, and time doesn't exist in it, that it's all one. So the unity teaching is, yes, there is something beyond this life, beyond this beingness, and it's called infinite beingness. Right? And that's what we return to. What exactly that looks like, I can't tell you, but I know it's fabulous. And I don't want to rush there. I want to make this heaven on earth. And that interaction I had with my dear friend Bruce was one of those moments of heaven on earth. Being with people when they're transitioning, when they are contemplating the meaning of life, is one of the greatest gifts you'll ever, ever have. And I am honored that I have had that experience with so many. I hope that answers your question. Bruce.
Welcome home, Reverend Ken.
Thanks.
This question is going to really sound odd, given the really serious nature of the last two, but June has historically, in the more than 44 years David and I've been together, been a very celebratory month, not just because of gay pride, but both of our now departed parents' anniversaries. We still celebrate today. Our anniversary was just 5 days ago, our 17th wedding anniversary. And thank you. We are really feeling almost guilty and having a hard time reconciling what's happening in the world when I think of, the atrocities in Ukraine and what's happening in Palestine, now with what's happening in Iran. It almost feels like we shouldn't be celebrating the wonderful things that happen to us usually every June. And it's just been really hard for the both of us. And we're finding it difficult to just stay focused and at the same time being positive about what's happening here in our wonderful city, enjoying this beautiful weather we're having, knowing that the rest of the world is in such turmoil, and it's been created by people that don't get that there's a better way than being everything that we all believe is, wrong with the world. I wondered if you could sort of touch on that.
So I think a great way to teach people that we should be living more loving and joyfully would be to be angry and mad. That was a joke. So here's the dilemma, right? So when we would squelch our own joy, squelch our own happiness, squelch our own celebrations because of how other people are behaving or because there is pain in the world, we actually are creating more pain. We're actually not lifting things up. I shared this when I was with Byron Katie once. I was talking about the struggles of raising my teenage son at the time, and she asked me a question. Well, I wanted to teach him how to be happy, how to live a happy life. And she go, well, isn't the way to do that to live a happy life? If we want to be the example in the world, we celebrate the milestones. We celebrate the success. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate love. We celebrate joy in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the sorrow. Both things can happen at the same time. You can hold two thoughts in your mind and two emotions in your mind at the same time. We frequently do, and it's what makes us so conflicted. Right? I can laugh at funerals. I can cry at weddings. Those things happen because we are so complex and the world is so complex, right? But to subjugate our own joy because of the misbehavior or the pain of other people is a form of self-sacrifice that I don't think helps. Yes, we can acknowledge and should and will and do acknowledge the suffering, the pain of other people. It shouldn't be, but it always has been. There are people who came before you and I who lived lives that were not able to celebrate their love openly. There are people who were tortured, and there are people in the world today who are killed for who they are. And I would say to you that you're celebrating and you're standing up and honoring your love and your marriage is the greatest act of civil disobedience you could ever do in the world. And it is a way of doing it without anger. And it's a way of doing it without creating more pain in the world. It's showing by shining example what love can do. All right? And so feel the sorrow, feel the hurt, feel the anger. Do not squelch any of those, but also do not squelch the love and the joy and the happiness. Right? No, we have other questions here. Hi.
Hi. My name's Bry. This is scary for me. I was a toss out as a kid, a very small little kid. I was a toss out onto the streets. And I was a mistake, baby. And this old couple picked me up and raised me, but they raised me pagan and Wicca and witchcraft. And that's all I know. I never went to school. Never went to college, but that's all I know. And sometimes when I leave here, I feel a little guilty. I'm like, wow. But then when I'm doing magic and stuff like that, I always feel a homeboy speaking to me, and I can feel and smell jasmine, and he says he's Jesus. And I believe that because everything that tingles in my chest comes true. Is that okay to do both?
Yes. Next question. So wait, I'm going to address it, Bry. So pagan has become a pejorative, but pagan only means indigenous religion. It means the cultural, spiritual religion of our ancestors. And it's the religion that everything that we say, we call Christianity, we call Judaism, we call Muslim, we call all those things, comes out of that paganism. All that indigenous religion and spiritual practices have been fully incorporated into all the world's religions right now, including unity. Including unity. We use pagan rituals all the time here. Burning bowl, it's a pagan ritual, right? Easter is a pagan ritual, right? So this idea that any one faith, any one religion, any one spiritual path is better or more evolved than the other is bullshit. Sorry, I said it out loud from platform. BS. It is a belief system, a BS that keeps us trapped and small. Whatever spirit is calling you to, whatever spirit is calling you to worship, to celebrate, to embody, is your highest calling. When you do it to lift yourself and the world up. And if you're doing it correctly, it doesn't take away from other people. It actually lifts everyone, creates a win-win situation for the whole planet. And that's what the planet needs. Everyone standing up and saying, how can I express all that I have been given and all the joy and wisdom that is within me and create something for everyone? Because we live in an infinite universe with infinite potential. And your having what you need does not take away anything from anyone else. And your sharing that with us here today, Bri, actually lifts all of us up. Because each and every one of us has some kind of little family ritual that comes out, not out of Christianity, but comes out of our natural, organic longing for spirituality. It's why we honor the kids. They know that better than we do. They love magic. They love possibility. They love the intrigue, thus the conjuring. My daughter loves to make potions, right? And we call it holy water in Catholicism. One of my favorite is a priest I know that when he became a priest, his mom was so excited. He goes, every time he came home, she goes, you had to bring me holy water. For those of you who aren't raised Catholic, they bless the water. You can get little bottles of holy water. They sprinkle it on you at Catholic church. It's quite an interesting ritual. It's again, pagan. The ritual baths, right? And so he was so frustrated. He goes, Mom, I didn't bring you. So he walked over to the kitchen faucet and blessed it and said, there, you have a tap of holy water now. Right? And that's the capacity we all have, is to bless the water we take in every day and call it holy. Right? To bless the flow of life to us and call it holy. Now I'm going over, so I'm going to take one more question. Who has the burning desire for one last question? Here we go.
Hey, Ken, with all the turmoil that's happening in the world right now, I think prayer is very powerful. Can you explain the metaphysics of how our prayers work?
Yes. So unity is part of the New Thought movement, which means taking on new thought, that it's not brand new, but we are personally taking on new thought. Well, the metaphysics of how prayer works, as our understanding of it, is we don't beg or beseech. There is not a deity up in the sky causing people to be bombed, obliterating whole nations or people or classes of people. What there is human consciousness operating on a lower level. So when we can take on a new thought and we can shift our thinking of us and them, good and bad, right and wrong, to understanding that divine order is at work, that wholeness and healing are operating as the essential part of our being, and that love, even when we can't see it or feel it, is the most powerful change agent on the planet. We shift ourselves for the situation, and the situation has no choice but to shift. The situation isn't being shifted by some deity or by the power of our prayer, but by the effect of our shift in consciousness. So consciousness is a really fancy word, again, to be for belief system. And if we believe something is impossible, guess what? It is. But when we believe it is possible even that much, that there could be peace on earth, that there could be love as the primary example of how to operate. Then we can see those seas part. We can see nations rise, and we can see people of every walk of life honored, celebrated, and cared for. That which you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. It's a spiritual teaching that transcends any faith. That which we hold in our heart and minds simultaneously is what we create in the world. So when you see evil, notice where it abides within you. When you see fear, notice that you are fearful too, and work on shifting you. And that's the metaphysics of prayer. We shift ourselves so that the outside can shift. Our prayer chaplains, who are wearing white stoles here today, train in this all the time. They are the greatest examples and champions of affirmative prayer. And I invite you to pray with them today.